12 games for the people who don't know what we do or what we have done. Okay, so I would like to make a different presentation. I don't want to make a company presentation, what we have done, all the information about our track records, our experience are available online. So I would like to make a presentation of myself, the history of becoming a dreamer of doing video games to professional game developers. So let me try to make this very informal presentation. Hope you will have some fun. And then we'll go through more technical and product presentation. And I will tell you more about the rebranding of the company. So, okay. The LibreOffice, right?
It's open.
It's here. Okay. Okay, so the game industry is a roller coaster. This is one of the most difficult careers someone can envision. So when you're kids, it's probably easier to tell your parents you want to be an astronaut and not a game developers, because since a few years ago, making video games, what you want to play video games, you are supposed to go work, be a lawyer, be a doctor. I think I was lucky enough that my parents divorced, and into that chaos, I was able to do whatever I wanted. So I was able to have my time to sneak out and do my own things. No, but honestly, I was supported, and I was born on top of the biggest arcade in my small regional town called Crotone in South Italy. So it was like a fate. I was on the second floor, and the biggest arcade was down. So every day I was there with my brother playing old video games like Cruel, the Space Invaders, it was the beginning of the game industry. I don't know how much money I spent. I think I made this family rich with all the coins we put there. But this is where I started. And I used to play with my friends with a ColecoVision system. I had an Atari 2600 myself. And really, video games captured my imagination from the beginning. And so let me go step by step. So who is Giuseppe Crugliano? It's me, not in order of importance. Human being, with a bird in French mode. A passionate video game developers. You cannot be a game developers if you don't play video games. Entrepreneur, self-made. I learned myself from my mistake. I'm still learning. I'm still doing good things, hopefully, and bad things. Navid gamer, hardcore, and a family man, happy one. So I'm a sort of very well balanced person with feet on the ground and my head over the clouds. So how everything began. So Giuseppe, what will you do when you will be grown up? So it's a big question, that every kids are being asked. Maybe too early. I want to play. So I will be an astronaut. Maybe a drunken one? Or maybe a superhero? Every kid's dream of being something. No, I want to be a video game developer. You know, this was my futures. But when I'm looking at maybe like Dirk, you know? So that was, I was 8 years old. I had a very, very clear ideas of my futures. I was 8 years old, and everyone, what you will do, I want to make video games. We're talking about 84. It's not like, now everyone have some informatic knowledge, everyone play video games, programming. There was no internet. It was almost like being part of a secret society, an underground society. Because I remember my cousins were coming to my home, and I was programming Spectrum, then Amiga, and they really didn't understand what was that. It was almost scary. So it was different. All the knowledge came from your experimentation. I come from a very small town in South Italy. There was no internet, no university. It was very, very hard to get information. And I remember to start programming Amiga in assembly language. It was very hard to find the original assembly manual. And I remember I spent a lot of money from someone who copied the original manual. I think I spent, it was like 100 euros for a photocopied manual at that time. But it was the only way to find information and start programming and experimenting. Now, when you have a problem, you go on Google and you find almost, you know, all the answer you need. You have the pre-compiled stuff. On Asset Store, you have a piece of codes. So, just my background, I started as a programmer, but I'm also an artist. I'm an hybrid. I'm between an analytic guy, a technical guy, but I'm also a creative guy, almost an artist. So I have this dual identity, but this was lucky because when you run a development studio, it's better to have this 360-degree knowledge, so you know that nobody can cheat you. You know, so you understand what's going on. So I can open a code and I understand. I'm not a good programmer, I'm a bad programmer, but I have my basic knowledge. I know what's going on into a 3D package, on 2D packages. I'm able to create and understand sound engineer. This is very good. So, because I wasn't able to specialize in something, I was lucky because now I have the right knowledge, I think, to run a studio and run a team. So, going on. So, programmers must remain focused. So, I wanted to be distracted by other things, you know, but then when you grow up, when you are 14, 15, then you go looking for something else. So, a certain period of my life, I was more distracted by something else because you grow up. But then after 2-3 years, I understood that I had to start focusing on my futures. So I think at around 18 years old, I started to work as a, I started to think in a more professional way, and I started to work and enter the industry. First with a very small studio doing software, doing web design. I'm talking web design in the 90s, where people had no computers, they didn't understand what was a website. It was very, very early stage. So after a few years, from 18 years old, I started to work into the industry. Yes, can you change? Okay, so I told you, so Crotone, my town, is from South Italy, so that was why I started to why I fell in love with video games, because there was only one arcade in Crotone, and the quality of the arcade games were much higher of a console game. So if you wanted to go and see the latest technology, the most advanced games from technological and creative point of view, you had to put your coins into arcades. So Crotone, where is it? Just to let you know, is here. Everyone, where are you from? Reggio Calabria, everyone knows Reggio Calabria, but I was here, almost nowhere, into the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, but nowhere. So it was very hard. It was very hard, as I told you, to get information about computer programming. It was just me and probably another couple of guys. You guys are now lucky enough. You have schools like this. You meet other guys that have this passion. You can create small groups. This indie development scene, it's fantastic. It's a sparks, of the futures of the industry. At that time, it was really a solitary research and development on something. And the technology was not like the modern PC, the modern phone. It was a 48 key. There was nothing. So you were creating with a very, very small resources. You were trying to do something interesting. But probably this background, it's something that is missing now. If I was a director of an academy, I probably would put my students, the programming, on creating something with something like this, like programming a video game on a Commodore 64 on a Spectrum, just to understand how to optimize the code, because now everything is so high level. You start with Unity, you don't care what's underneath, this machine, this engine, and you end up writing non-performant code because you don't care. You have so much power that you don't care. Just see things running, but you don't care optimize. But this is not good because when you start professionally, you probably have to work on set-top box with a very low spec machine, and then you are not prepared to work on low spec machine. So that programming was when you buy a Spectrum or a Commodore 64. Now when you buy a PC, you have internet. The first thing, you go on the web, you go on YouTube, you go on Facebook. When you bought a Commodore 64, a Spectrum, an Amstrad, the first thing you saw when you turned on the computer was a basic prompt. So it was natural to start and writing some lines of code. It was very, very stimulating, this. Now it's different, but I think that's why I started programming, because I was curious. I played video games and say, how can I do video games? I was 8 years old, and the first thing I typed into my Spectrum when I bought the first day, I said, can you make me Mazinga video games? And I saw type error or something. I said, it was like a challenging. Okay, I will learn how to program and I will make video games. It was like between me and him. It was on a personal basis. So then the Amiga revolution came. There was a big step forwards. I think I cannot remember a giant step between the 8 and 16-bit era of computer. The difference between the gap between a Spectrum, Commodore 64 and Amiga, I think even now between a PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3, PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4, it's not like that. The Amiga was a really jaw-dropping machine, was revolutionary. And I think nothing today can be compared of this chance. So the Amiga gave me, because I was young, remember I was 12, 13, so it's not like being 20, 22, going to school, understand mathematics, having, being prepared to some logic to start programming. So imagine someone very young start programming this kind of machines. But the Amiga gave us a more high-level tools to start developing something. In fact, I started to do something with Amos. Was a programming language. Probably this is the Unity grandfather. It was still everything programming. It was a basic language, but was towards game development. It was something that was done specifically for game development. It's a French product, and I still have the original box of the stuff that was bought by my grandfather. And I still keep them to remind me where I'm from, my origin. And the Amiga and Amos gave me the instrument to create something on my own, because doing something your own with assembly, doing graphics was too much for one guy. probably because I wasn't smart enough like other. But with Amos, I was able to spend less time on coding, more time on Deluxe Paint, doing some 2D stuff, creating some music. So I was able to start packaging demo on my own because I had no one else in my town to work with me on video games. My brother is a very good artist, but was distracted by martial arts, so I ended up doing things all by myself. So the dream started. With Amiga, I started to write some demos and pestering all the Italian software houses. And there is one of the representative of the historical software houses in Italy, which is Riccardo Cangini. And one of my best friends is moving to Malta. It's opening a studio here. So probably he received some of my garbage. Maybe you don't remember. So now you send demos through internet, you have email, Dropbox, everything. At that time, you had to put everything on a small floppy disk, go to the post office, send something, and calling to see, did you receive my package? Did you check my demo? So imagine it was a prehistoric. It was a totally different way of work. So that was our WeTransfer. This was our Skype. You know, it's funny. It's just how long ago? 25 years ago?
Yeah.
It's nothing. 25 years, everything changed. So after this period of creating demos, sending stuff, I started to work into the industry, and I started into a company in Crotone that tried to do something. They received a lot of EU funds, but the problem is that directors were not exactly convinced to do video games with that money. They washed the money. We were there, like 20 people trying to do something. Nothing went onto the market, but we had experience with Maya, 3D Studio Max, Silicon Graphics, Workstation, and it was very, very hard to access this kind of software without big money. They had big money, they bought this equipment, they didn't care about creating something, but our team was lucky to access this knowledge. And so we made some products, something went onto the market, but at the end we were trained for more than 5 years and exposed to technology and softwares. And after this period, I was lucky to meet this gentleman we were in Cannes. In Cannes was an expo, and I was reading about him because he's coming from the legendary Simul Mondo, was the very first video game developer studio in Italy, and that seeded the talent in Italy. And we met, we talked, and I started to pitch my stuff to him, and he was so brave to hire me after 1 year we talked. So I started slowly doing like a web design to prove myself. I went like a couple of times for an interview. There was no Skype to make an interview, so I had to take the train, go to North Italy, 13 hours, having 1 hour interview, sleeping on a chair, and then going back. So everything came, from the hard work. But I think probably my passion convinced him to hiring, and this gave me the opportunity to work on commercial stuff, on games like Mister. I was lucky to make the first prototyping, programming, and the first Game Boy Advance prototype of Sandokan. Then they released it on PC. But we experimented a lot with new technology. For example, we made a Xbox One prototype without an official Xbox development kit. We modded the Xbox, and we were able to access the early version of the Virtuals to run on Xbox One, and we made a very beautiful prototype for Kinder Ferrero, which experimented. They were trying to let Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo understand the potential of other games at that time. They were, and they're still very ahead of times. So it was a very good experiment. It was very, very useful. So after a period in Artematica, I decided to start my own company because this was my objective from the beginning. And so 12 games started in 2003. Everyone asked me why 12. I was just playing with numbers and names, and 12 because I was born April 12th. That's why it's simple. Everyone saw 12 as a magic Kabbalah number. It was just my birthday. It's funny. And in 2003, I started the operation, and it was just me with a small desk, a PC, and a fax machine at home, and I was responding to the client like, hello, 12 games. Can I speak with Mr. Crugliano? Yes, hold on a second. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hello, it's me who's speaking. So it was a kind of. But believe me, because I used to work on several aspects of video game development, I was doing some small other games, but I was doing almost everything. I was doing programming, I was doing flash animation and graphic, photoshopping, creating audio, selling, doing business development. So I started like this, it was garage game, from my bedroom. But at the same time, while I was doing some work for I started to think about a new IP. I wanted to make a platformer because I love platformers. So I didn't make a market research and say, okay, what kind of game I'm going to do. I was young and I wanted to do the game I like. So I started to hire the first team because I started to prototype the Crash Dummy game, then called Sit Down by a publisher. It's a long story, I don't want to keep too much time from you. I started to assemble the team. I found this place was underneath my apartment. And I started to hire people from Crotone, but I started also to hire people from all Italy, from Sicily, from Milan, and I started to join these talented people all together. So this was the beginning of 12 Games. So we had a very, very funny moment. We really enjoyed working on this game. And the thing is that the first game we did was on console, which was very, very difficult because we started something without having the hardware device, the SDK. We used an engine at that time that was the only one supporting PSP, Nintendo Wii for the very first time. I think we did the first Wii game in Italy, PlayStation 2, PC, because the publisher at that time wanted a multi-platform game. So we took this engine, we started working the code on PC, then we received the SDK, the development kit, and we were able, despite the team was not trained on console development, we were able to deliver a game on 4 different platforms. It was very challenging. It was one of the biggest lessons I had in my career because it was assembling a team, creating a product, deal with the publisher, going to the market. It was very, very challenging. So we went to the market, we started to be exposed to the public, to the press. We had a lot of interviews, everyone was talking about us, what we were doing, the new promise in Italy, game development. It was a good moment because there was this moment until 2008, 2009. So I'm going to talk about this. So we reached the market. This is a picture from E3 in Los Angeles. I don't remember, it was 2006, something like this. I really don't remember. But it was a big goal for me. So I was exposed into the biggest trade show with our game here in PSP version. And we entered the market right after that. So then 2008 was a very, very bad moment. The business model we had was pure developers working with publisher. The business model was, I'm a developer, I pitch a game design, a game idea to you, and publisher were financing the ideas. Was the model advances versus royalties. So publisher were financing project, but publisher were lending money from banks or from investors. In 2008, we had more than 1 million euros contract signed for 3 games. And we were expanding. We reached a peak of 30 people in-house. We were really, really growing. And everyone was confident that things were going better and better. But suddenly, in just 4 months, everything changed. Because go home. The bank clash. And this publisher that signed developers like us didn't secure the funds to make, but they had money from the bank. But that's normal. But I was, because 12 Games, it was and is still a sole proprietorship. I was not enough experienced to understand this. I thought the publisher had a lot of money, and if they signed a contract, they had that money. But in reality, they didn't have that money. So the bank crashed, and they collapsed. And we had all this contract cancelled. And yeah. Yeah. Can you go back one? So just to explain. So here, I had to face the most difficult period of my life. Well, after I was on the worst earthquake in Italy in the 80s when I was 5 years old. And I was on the airplane towards New York in September 11. I was on New York. But this was worst because I had to lay off almost 30 people. Most of them were family men. It was very, very, very hard. But now, if I think about it, I think I want to thank this experience because it was my growth. I had to pass through this period to understand what to do and what not to do into the future. That was my lesson. That's why now we are changing the way we do business. And this happened when I was just married, and after my marriage, my daughter was born. So in the period of my life that I was supposed to be happier, so being married, having a child, I had to handle all this stuff, like shutting down the studio, being without money for myself as well. So I had to face very, very tough moments. But I don't know how. Maybe it was my passion for video games, or the passion and the love of what I do, and I will always do until I die. I kept the hard work. I understood that it was the moment to work harder than ever. And that, I think, was the secret of surviving that moment. I think that many people would have surrendered and said, okay, I give up, I go and find myself a job. But my nature, was, no, I need to keep going. I need to work for my dreams. I cannot give up because the other failures, I cannot destroy my dreams, my life, because of the errors of someone else, or because a moment in the world that can happen. A war can happen, an earthquake can happen, in the contract it's act of God. Anything can happen. So I kept working and working harder than ever. So I rebuilt. So I found a new place. Oh, luckily, I never lended the money from a bank or from an investor. Everything came from the contract. So the good things was that I had no debts. It was more easy for me to survive because 12 Games remained as a company. So the operation continued. I worked for 1.5 years again, going back from my home. So what going back to the root. And then I built a game. So I started a new studio, I hired new people, and we started to working on motion sensing stuff. The Kinect was just out, and we were one of the first studio in the world working on motion sensing technology. PrimeSense is the Israeli company that licensed the technology to Microsoft, and we started to work on motion sensing game with them. We really helped them debug their SDK, improve their technology. So for around 5 years, we focused a lot on work for hire, on motion sensing technology. In fact, we worked on PrimeSense, on Leap motion devices, Extreme 3D, and this was really trying to find a niche, trying to find a way to make new business. It's like the blue ocean market, like Nintendo did. It was the war between Microsoft and Sony, and Nintendo understood at that time, after the GameCube failure, that they had to make something different because they cannot compete with the two giants. In fact, they started the Wii, they launched the Wii, and they targeted the casual gamers, the family. So I think I did, without understanding, was my instinct the same. So I found a niche to work. And we started to work, and we made something with Sony, Evolution Studio. We did some concept work. So we started the game. So we entered the market. For example, we reused what we had for new markets. We did Sit the Dummy for the console, and we sold this property for the arcade market. That's how we rebuilt our studio and our company. So, we worked with the Prime Sense and the Leap Motion, and yeah, it was funny. So, I don't want to keep any longer. Quickly, this is what we have done in the past. If you can go to the next slide, please. So this is Capoeira. This game passed through 4 publishers. 4 publishers didn't pay us, but we spent a lot of money. We did motion capture session with our own money. We finished the product, and now it's available, and we self-published the PC version on Steam, if someone is interested. At least we didn't throw away all the work and all the money we spent on this product. Can you go on? So this is Sit the Dummy that we released on several platforms. Go on. And we start. This was a party game we did for a publisher for Nintendo Wii. They collapsed, they closed. We started to port this on mobile, but then we stopped because we had other priority. And these are motion sensing game. This was the very first-person shooter for the Leap Motion device. I don't know if you are familiar with it. It's a small device that reads your hands and finger to interact with the space. So they wanted something to prove that people were able to play a first-person shooter with this device. So this game you can play with your hands and your finger. This was made in only 40 days, reusing assets from our library, from other games. Was challenging, but that was a work for hire, well paid. 40 days we delivered, and we made a very good achievement. The very first FPS for Leap Motion. And we continued, and this is one of our current clients. We are doing motion sensing games for this American client. We did a snowboard game that uses normal webcam as a motion sensing devices. And other products. So now 12 Games is now rebranded since we are now in Malta. The new name of the company is PlayMagic. What changed between 12 Games and PlayMagic? Essentially, PlayMagic will try to be not only a business-to-business company, but a business-to-client. It means we are ready to publish our own game and hopefully third-party games. So we wanted to change the name because it's a new identity, it's a new way to work. And the first game that it's currently in production under the PlayMagic brand, it's Rumble, the video game for mobile. And we are in partnership with a UK publisher, Leap Entertainment. They have the license, they develop and ship the PC and console version, and they asked us to produce, and we are investing into this incredible license, and we will be out into the market by November. And PlayMagic will continue, and we are in discussion in securing very important license, and there will be more in the next few months to be announced. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. We are hiring at the moment. We are building the studio. We are around 6 people in the Malta studio. We still have around 5 people in Italy. Someone will move here. We plan to reach to be around 15 by the end of the year. We're actively seeking programmers, artists. We are recruiting not only from Malta but worldwide, even with headhunters. So thank you. If you have any question, I'm here, and I can be reached on to PlayMagic or 12 Games website. Thank you. Any question? I hope I wanted to entertain you a little bit. I didn't want to go through a company presentation. I just wanted to tell you more about me. because there are young faces here, and I'm sure it's funny and useful to understand and to prove that if you believe in something, you can build something from nothing. Remember, ideas are more important than money. If you have good ideas, you will find the money to do things, or a way to do things without money or very few monies. Monies are nothing without ideas. You can have the good life, but if you have dreams of building something like video games or movie, it means nothing. You must have ideas. So when you talk with people with money, they need you. You don't need them. They need you because you have ideas and entrepreneurship. So believe in yourself, in what you're doing, especially in the very bad moment. I learned it on my skin, me and my family. So keep doing the hard work, whatever happens. Even if the roof comes down, keep working. Just move a little bit to not be hit. Stay alive at least. Okay. If you have any question, okay, that's it for me. Thank you. Sorry for